Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for next week's 10 days for today's second video. It's going to take us into the beginning of November. So we've got a cold snap coming up at the end of the week, of course. Been talking about this in the videos quite a bit just lately. Winds will be turning into the north on Friday, and it's going to bring colder air down from the Arctic, so it will be a cold weekend. There will be snow up across northern hills across Scotland and northeastern England. A few flakes can't be ruled out elsewhere as well. There will also be a lot of dry weather over this weekend with plenty of crisp sunshine and cold north wind. Now next week, looking quite interesting. We're going to start to build the high pressure up over Scandinavia, but at the same time, we're going to start moving low pressure in from off the Atlantic. Now, if this was a few weeks further on, let's say it was about a month further on at the end of November or start of December, we'd probably be able to be thinking a bit about snow events. It's too early for that, so just lots of cold rain could be on the way next week, and I'll talk you through what's going on there very shortly. Before I go on with that, just to say that today's first video was the ECMWF 30-day ensemble forecast, taking us into the second half of November. So have a look at that and see what you think. So we'll start off today's video by having a look at central England temperature. We are currently provisionally at 12.4 now. For October, an anomaly of just over 1 degree above average. That's provisional up to the 22nd, up to yesterday. That's probably going to hold steady for the next 2 or 3 days. It shouldn't move up a great deal more than that. I don't think it'll drop much more than that either. So holding steady until around Friday, and then we may get a little bit of a collapse actually in the CET. Still unsure exactly where it's going to finish, but I think at the best, the highest, will be low 11s. And if we do get a run of frosty nights at some point over weekend and start next week, this may actually finish underneath 11 degrees, say somewhere around 10.5 to 10.9 could be the finishing point for October's CET. It won't be a particularly big deviation anyway, be very close to average, and this of course does mark a change that we've seen since August really. So let's go back up to the full list of years. So January, of course, came out 1.5 degrees above average. There we have the 2 cold months, February and March. Will we be able to add November to that to those 2 cold and average months this year? I wouldn't be all that surprised if we had a colder than average November based on the charts that we're seeing at the moment. Of course, it's very early days on that. And then after the 2 cold months, we went very warm with an anomaly of around 2 degrees above average from April down to July. The peak of that spell of very warm months, April, May, June and July, the peak came in July when it was over 3 degrees above average, exceptionally hot month. August showed a change. We cooled down in August, still above average, but only less than 1 degree above average. That continued into September. September came out almost bang on average, and then or now we are into October. I think October again is going to be coming out very close to average. It will certainly be within 1 degree, probably within half a degree of average. So on the milder side, yes, again in October, but I think very, very close to average. And then, as I say, November could possibly be the 3rd month that we can add to those only 2 colder than average months that we've had so far this year. So it has been a very interesting year of weather, and we've still got November and December to go. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for Liverpool, looking at the city of Liverpool today. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Liverpool. You can see why I'm talking about the chance of a crash in the CET from the weekend through to the early part of next week, because that's where we're starting off at right now, well above average with those upper air temperatures, although we have had a bit of an inversion, so it is actually cooler on the surface than you would expect, given the warm air a lot. But nevertheless, upper air temperatures are a bit above average. They're going to be going colder than average, though, over weekend and into next week. A real drop, a real sort of drop off the cliff there in many ways, from around 15 degrees above average to under -5 degrees below average. So big drop in temperature there in terms of the upper air temperatures. We will notice that on the surface as well. Then pretty cold really through the early part of next week, through the first week of November, which is this period just here. We are slowly moving those ensemble members back up towards the red line. It takes quite a long time to do it, but closer to average with the upper air temperatures as we're going into the first week of November. Certainly not particularly warm though, you have to say. Precipitation wise, there's a lot of dry weather to come over the next week. We have got some rainfall there associated with the drop in the temperature, and maybe some wintry showers on Saturday. After that, plenty of dry weather initially, but it does result turning more unsettled through that opening week of November. Temperature anomalies are coming out below average from the 23rd through to the 31st of October. A colder than average week coming up for the UK, for Ireland, for France, for much of Scandinavia as well, with those northerly winds bringing Arctic air down across the western part of Europe. Precipitation anomalies are still coming out drier than average from the 23rd through to the 31st of October. Quite substantially so, actually, for many parts of England and Wales. Anyway, which I'm going to show you the charts in a moment for next week. That's a little bit surprising given the charts we're seeing for next week. Although, bear in mind, we're only at Tuesday this week, so we have got all of this week's dry weather to go. It's not until next week, but it looks like things are turning more unsettled. So these may trend, excuse me, these may trend more unsettled over the next few days. Right, so this is how things are looking for Friday, where we have high pressure through the central Atlantic, and it's moving up towards Greenland with low pressure to our east. That's forcing the wind into the north on Friday, and there's a cold front moving southwards, introducing those northerly winds as well. That cold front will be very weak, but it will mark the boundary between the relatively mild air that we're going to have up to Friday, and then these cold Arctic winds extending down across the country during Friday itself. That's Saturday, well and truly under the cosh with that northerly wind. If you follow the isobars back, you can see the air is originating from a very long way north, pushing down across the west of Europe. The only saving grace is that there's a long sea track, and sea surface temperatures are pretty warm at the moment following the hot summer, so that will moderate things a little bit. But even so, this does look like a very potent northerly wind for so early in the winter season. There's the upper air temperatures. You can see they are widely cold across the UK. I mean, we're not just talking about cool air, we're talking about genuinely cold Arctic air there, with a -5 isotherm through many parts of the country. That's kind of like one of the minimum requirements for snow. Thickness lines, again, I talked about this yesterday, the 528 line, the blue line, that has cleared the country on Saturday. So, again, it's all indicative that this is a very unusually potently cold northerly wind for this early in the season. May bring wintry showers with it as well. We get through into Sunday and we find this high pressure ridging in from off the Atlantic, just trying to kill off that northerly wind. So the emphasis over the weekend will shift from the cold northerly wind and wintry showers on Saturday to more in the way of drier weather on Sunday. Of course, as it's turning dry, as the wind is falling out, we still have the legacy of the cold temperatures, and so frost will become increasingly likely through the second half of the weekend. Right, we're through to Monday, and we see what's happening then. We've got high pressure starting to build over the cold air across Scandinavia, with low pressure out in the Atlantic. So this low pressure is trying to bring in milder Atlantic winds, but the high pressure of Scandinavia is trying to maintain cold winds from the east and the north. This low pressure comes up against that high pressure and stalls. So there we are on Tuesday. You see the Scandinavian high is really taking over across sort of like the north of Scandinavia. The low pressure out in the Atlantic is being blocked and it's slipping downwards, southwards in towards the Bay of Biscay. If this was about a month to 6 weeks on, this will be a very exciting chart. You will be expecting widespread heavy snow from this. As it is, the low pressure is stalling to the west, and any precipitation on it is going to be rain, except maybe for a little bit of wintry stuff over hills and mountains. That low pressure slips away to our south as we go through to Wednesday, so high pressure over Scandinavia does win this battle. We've got, again, that high pressure up there to the north of Scandinavia. It's turning the wind into the east as this low pressure slips away to the south. Even though we're not going to get anything particularly wintry from this situation next week, it is interesting that we are seeing this occurring within the model output. It's a reminder of what we had back in February and March, when we had the beast from the east. And it's interesting how this is starting to recur as we're getting closer towards the winter. That's Thursday next week. Low pressure is then anchored to the south of the country. High pressure is still there to the north. So that could be bringing quite a lot of wet weather into the south, perhaps, that area of low pressure. High pressure to the north keeps it mainly dry up across Scotland. We're up to day 10, and that's how we look on day 10, with high pressure taking over across Scandinavia. Winds are in from the east. The upper air temperatures will be relatively mild with that, but down on the surface, I suspect it's tracking in a lot of cloud from off the North Sea. Probably misty, murky, damp, drizzly conditions. Not very pleasant at all, I wouldn't think, as we go into the start of November. A little bit beyond day 10, it starts to get quite interesting, because we really do set up very extensive blocking on this particular GFS run. You see how it's ridging from Scandinavia through the Norwegian Sea, heading up towards Greenland. Low pressure through the central part of the Atlantic. Again, none of this is particularly cold in itself. It's just very interesting weather patterns, unusual weather patterns for early November. This is normally one of the most active times of the year for the Atlantic. You normally expect deep areas of low pressure crashing in from Greenland and Iceland, bring gales and bouts of heavy rain. You don't tend to associate November with that kind, or early November, with that kind of very extensive northern blocking pattern. Actually, retrogression is taking place here as well. I know people always get a little bit excited when I say the word retrogression. What happens with that is that we go against the zonal flow. So, in the zonal flow, and the typical flow for the northern hemisphere is that we will take weather systems from the west to the east. That is the typical zonal flow, and we get that because of the way the Earth is circulating around the sun. So we get a zonal flow in the northern hemisphere usually. When the zonal flow fails, we can get retrogression, and retrogression is when we take high weather systems, typically high pressure, from east to west, as opposed to the zonal flow, which is west to east. So you see there on the 2nd of November, the high pressure is over Scandinavia. As we go through to the 3rd of November, the high pressure is ridging from Scandinavia towards the Norwegian Sea. By the time we get through to the 4th and the 5th of November, that high pressure is parking itself up as a genuine blocking feature over Greenland. So it has retrogressed from Scandinavia to Greenland. As I say, I know a lot of you get very excited when I use that word, because it means that something really unusual is happening within the atmosphere. That's how we finish up with the GFS run, which is on Thursday the 8th of November. A proper block of high pressure is in control over Greenland. We've got very cold air pushing down in towards Norway. That's starting to be brought our way on those east to northeasterly winds with the low pressure through the middle part of the Atlantic. So the AO and the NAO will both be very, very negative if that came off. These are the upper air temperatures. You notice very cold air is sinking into Scandinavia, and that is starting to head our way from the northeast. So that finishes up poised to be delivering a really, really unusually cold spell of weather for early November. It is almost certainly an outlier within the GFS and its ensemble, but, well, very interesting times if that was to verify, I can assure you. Right, this is ECMWF. We're back to that northerly on Friday. So here we go. The northerly is pushing down across the country on Friday. There we are for Saturday. Look how far south those northerly winds are stretching. They are originating up here in the Arctic, in the North Pole, are actually going down in towards kind of like Spain, Portugal and North Africa. So that is a very, very long fetch northerly wind that we've got there with those isobars. We go through to Sunday into Monday. The ridge is building across the country and getting up towards Scandinavia. So over the weekend, the emphasis will shift from those wintry showers and the northerly winds that we have on Saturday towards drier conditions on Sunday and Monday. But no doubt with the chance of some pretty hard night frost. Then through Tuesday and into Wednesday, we set up low pressure to the south-southwest of the country, so quite a bit of low pressure down there. We've got the high pressure up over Scandinavia. This is dragging the air up kind of like from southern Europe, so it's not particularly cold, although I suspect again there would be a lot of low cloud, a lot of damp, misty, murky, probably maybe even foggy weather with that, and especially towards the east coast, probably quite unpleasant. That's how things are looking by the time we get through to day 10. Looks like overall by that point, high pressure is beginning to take over. And we've got this, again, this is a pattern that's been recurring really since May. We've got this high pressure from the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic, stretching up to the north of Scotland, stretching into Scandinavia, and then back to high pressure, which is actually centred over Russia. So again, we've got these thousands and thousands of miles of high pressure there. That's going to be dominating by day 10 if that is correct. The upper air temperatures won't be particularly cold if we have a look at those. See, actually, they're quite mild, and particularly in central parts of Europe, they're quite warm, but you wouldn't really realise that mild upper air temperature potential because there's going to be a lot of cloud, a lot of murk, a lot of damp, drizzly weather with that if it was to come off. And then finally, we've got the GM. There's that northerly wind setting in on Friday into Saturday, Sunday. Cold weekend coming up. Wind shifting from the north to the northeast. Wintry showers easing off. A lot of dry weather by the end of the weekend, but with those night frosts. There's a high pressure building over Scandinavia again through the early part of next week. A proper easterly is moving in there from Scotland. If this was, again, as I say, if this was about a month on, that would be bringing blizzards to parts of northern Britain, no doubt. Further south, these areas of low pressure are trying to move in from the Atlantic, but they're not really moving in with conviction. They're slipping that sort of way in towards Biscay and southern parts of France. Although we do keep low pressure quite close to the south through next week, which could bring rain at times. That's how we finish up at day 10. All looking very interesting in terms of a synoptic situation. It won't be particularly interesting at day 10 in terms of the weather. Probably a lot of cloud, probably a lot of gloom. Misty, murky, damp conditions are likely. But again, we've still got the suggestion that low pressure in the Atlantic is being blocked by this high pressure to the east. The jet stream, which is the black line, that's going in that sort of direction. So it's all indicative of the fact that blocking conditions are going to be staying with us and probably strengthening as we go up to day 10. The weather patterns are abnormal for the time of year. They remain abnormal as they have been pretty much consistently since we had that sudden stratospheric warming in the middle of February. This is when it all begins. These abnormal weather patterns that we've had this year begin with that sudden stratospheric warming in February. Since then, we've seen very unusual and abnormal weather patterns. This is continuing into the start of November, definitely. And we may well be on course for some interesting weather during November. We might get quite cold conditions. We may get snow in November. I wouldn't be that surprised if we did. Alternatively, we could get very mild conditions. We might get exceptionally mild conditions in November, and maybe we get a bit of both at times. What I don't think we will see a great deal of, certainly not in the first half of November anyway, is just a typical zonal westerly gales, Atlantic associated weather, bands of rain, gale force winds. I don't think we're going to have too much of that because these weather patterns, and that's typically what you'd expect in the early part of November, but these weather patterns look very unusual and abnormal. So I think we'll see something a little bit different, certainly through the first half of this November anyway. just to show what the latest GFS is suggesting for this northerly wind before we go. So this is the precipitation type forecast from the GFS model based on that GFS run from weatheroutlook.com. And there's the cold front moving southwards at 6 o'clock in the morning across northern England on Friday, with wintry showers following to the north. We move that cold front away, and then we go through Friday with wintry showers mainly restricted to the north and east of Scotland. Rain showers running down the east coast, and some wintry showers likely around Northern Ireland, and rain showers around those western coasts. Into Saturday, so it has reduced actually the wintry shower risk quite a bit compared to what it was showing yesterday. It is still showing snow showers across central part of Scotland, wintry showers possibly around these western coast, particularly sort of northwest England down to southwestern parts of Wales as well. Rain showers running down the east coast of course of Saturday afternoon. Showers mainly become restricted to coastal areas overnight Saturday to Sunday, and probably widespread frost on Saturday night, I would have thought. And then into Sunday, again, a lot of dry weather, some showers peppering the coast, but most inland areas looking dry. Another widespread frost, I would have thought, on Sunday night. These showers around the southeastern coast by 6 o'clock in the morning on Monday, they're mainly falling as rain as the air is coming in from off the North Sea. So the GFS, there was just yesterday from the GFS that we might get quite a lot of wintry showers on Saturday. It has backed away from that for the time being, but of course this is still all out of the high resolution model time frame, so we'll know more excuse me again, we'll know more about this northerly wind around Thursday. And then finally, just to leave you with this is the 5-day accumulated precipitation forecast from that GFS run. So in the next 5 days, lots and lots of dry weather, very little precipitation falling anywhere across England and Wales. There is some around the coast and those showers, more up across central and northern parts of Scotland. The 10-day is interesting because although there's a lot of low pressure around the country being blocked by the Scandinavian high next week, and you will think that will produce quite a lot of rain, actually the 10-day accumulated precipitation isn't all that wet really. It is quite wet for Ireland, particularly the Republic, but also Northern Ireland. It's quite wet for South and West Wales and South West England. But as we get up towards kind of like the rest of Wales into the Midlands, much of Northern Eastern England, there's barely sort of 6, 7, 8 millimetres of precipitation being forecast there up to the start of November. So even into next week, with lots of low pressure being blocked by the Atlantic, it doesn't look like there's going to be a great deal of precipitation away from the north and west, which you'll probably be a bit surprised about given the weather pattern overall does look quite unsettled next week as that high pressure blocks things out over Scandinavia. It looked like there's a lot of low pressure stalling around the country. So we'll just have to wait and see about that. But coming back into more reliable time frame, it looks as though we're going to get this northerly shot. Definitely Friday, Saturday, Sunday will be cold. But GFS has backed away from those wintry showers, although there are still wintry showers being forecast for the north and around those coastal areas. Otherwise, just a cold, crisp, dry weekend coming up. And then next week, the high pressure goes to Scandinavia. Low pressure tries to come in from off the Atlantic, but looks like it's going to be blocked. So weather patterns do remain abnormal as we move into November. Where this goes as we get further on into November, I have to wait and see, but I won't be at all surprised if we don't get some very, very interesting weather in November, and I'll say no more than that, and we'll wait and see how these patterns evolve over the next week or two. Right, tomorrow we've got the 5-day forecast, and we'll also have a look at the weather next week, 10 days again, and no doubt tomorrow we'll include the Bayesian Climate Centre for the next 40 days in that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.